was a pretty good cross-section of the community that attended our workshop. We had members of the Pentek Indian Band, the Okanagan Nation Alliance, interior health representatives, Community Living BC, citizens who just read the poster and thought I'd like to attend that. And on our panel, as well as the first responders, we had Margot Schilling from the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee, and Sue DeMonte, who's one of our community social workers. So the Pentek Community Response Network is a group of individuals and organizations who meet to promote education and awareness around the issues of abuse, neglect, or self-neglect of vulnerable adults. And a vulnerable adult can be someone with developmental difficulties, handicapped people, frail elderly, seniors living alone, those type of people.
Generally, we're responding with either before the police get there or, and a lot of times the police don't get there, but ambulance. And for the most part, we actually don't deal directly with the case. If there is neglect or abuse, that's usually recognized by BC Ambulance. So we're usually there simultaneous with them or just before them. So generally, we pass them off. So we don't have necessarily any direct contact. But having said that, we still try to recognize it in case the ambulance doesn't recognize those situations as well, and would obviously then want to forward that to the appropriate, whether it's the health or other agencies that would deal with the neglect or abuse. So, as I say, we don't really have too much in the way of the direct contact per se. But the one thing that we do see with regards to that, the common issue and problem when we do go to these medical calls is the two situations that come above is the reliability of the person we're dealing with. So a lot of seniors, as we know, either have Alzheimer's or other, physiological problems, and we see them and they're almost, it's like they're ranting about things and, oh, my kids are stealing all my money and this is happening to me and that's happened to me. And you want to take them as seriously as you can, but at the same token, you look at their situation and determine, is it valid? So that is one of the toughest things to deal with from our perspective, and I've heard that from the ambulance as well.
The private citizens who weren't too sure how they could help support and keep their neighbors and coworkers safe know that if it's a physical emergency that's threatening somebody immediately, you phone 911. But if it's something that you think is just not quite right, you're not sure what to do with it, you can report anonymously to the designated agency and have someone discreetly look into this situation. Because if people are noticing something's not quite right, very often something isn't. So it's just people taking care of people.
I would say that on a regular basis, there are incidents of fraud and scam in the community among seniors. There's also reported incidents to agencies such as Interior Health, Community Living BC, and the RCMP, who are designated agencies, and they are assigned to investigate any and all accusations of abuse, neglect, or self-neglect. So we try to educate the public about reporting what they see, or hear, or may suspect. And then after that, it's up to the reporting agency to start the investigation.
The one thing we do hear a lot of, and it was brought up earlier, is the incessant internet scam that is prevalent. And there's a number of different types. There's the clean up my computer scam. I signed up with this company, I paid $439. They've done this, and now they've asked for more money, or my bank account has been depleted because I provided them with everything about me. I told them what color my socks are today. And it's just not being savvy on the internet itself, or not understanding what it entails. There's people that want to maintain their independence and are unwilling to ask for that help because it shows weakness, because they've worked as professionals all their lives and had a lot of responsibility, and they may not have recognized in themselves or their partner where things are starting to slip. and you have something that maybe they didn't work with in their professional careers. If they retired 20 years ago, the internet was in its infancy at the time, so it was something that they never had to conquer. So susceptible, difficult to investigate from a policing perspective because of the international ramifications of these scams that use many different, see, now I'm getting into my age and gray hair of my knowledge of it. It jumps all around country to country, difficult to track down, not an investigator's dream of a file to try to solve because it is very complicated and sometimes not punishable. One of the first fraud files I had was an artist up in Hazelton who sent a lot of carved jewelry off to the Republic of Moldavia. If it starts with the Republic of, you don't send anything. But it was a lesson learned, and it was really the person's time, the value of it. But that was one of the first frauds, and that was early internet times. I think it's important for children of aging parents to know what they're doing on the internet, to educate them about it, to monitor it, clean it up for them. Then the other part of the internet is the dating scam. People become lonely. People become single later in life due to loss of a spouse, and they can meet people, and there's, as was mentioned already, there's these people that they meet online, send them money, or it's people that they meet online close and meet them in person, and relationships are developed and they're targeted. Maybe it's a real relationship for both of them with the intention of one person maybe not being so above board. Maybe that love is there and the family doesn't approve of it. Well, if the person is sound of mind and able to make those decisions for themselves, there's a lot of conflict that we run into there. We have family members calling, my mother's being taken advantage of by this younger man. He's only 73 and she's 83 and he's just after her money. Well, you know what? Your mom has made the decision. She's enjoying it. She's like, it's my money. This guy makes me feel good and young again. I only have a few years left. If they wanted more money, they should have got better jobs, right? Like, it's those kind of things. That's a reasonable answer, right? It may not be the nicest or what the kids want to hear. We also get. So yeah, we talked about the tax scam. I'm jumping around a little bit, but I was corrected by the Canada Revenue Agency when I went public in the news and said that, they'll never call you. They do everything by the mail. They call people all the time, apparently. And I screwed up their whole system. But they said, we've gotten over that because people say, well, Corporal Wigglesworth said you never call. We do call. And then we provide them all kinds of information about them that we know, and then they're eventually convinced. But it gets to the point where the tax man's calling you. You probably know you have back taxes owed. It shouldn't be a surprise. But it scares people. We're going to call the police on you. We're going to threaten. It's that threatening persistence thing. And then people say, well, it's the Indian accent. I knew it wasn't the tax man. It's like, well, there's a lot of people from Southeast Asia that work for a Canada Revenue Agency that have that lineage. So it gets confusing, but I think it's a matter of there's a lot of people that take advantage with the phone. The other thing is on the phone as opposed to the internet. There's ways of recognizing landlines. There's getting phone lists. People access information all the time. So businesses close down. We have people in our neighborhood that steal all the records from businesses, whether it's restaurants, all the receipts from credit cards, and they just try to build portfolios so they can apply for more credit cards and phones and build up things. So it's that education of protecting your personal finances. And it's not just elderly people, it's anyone in this room and younger. So now then we receive reports of elder abuse, as I was touching on. My mom's being taken advantage of by my sister. She's got her hands in everything. And it's like, well, we can't go in and settle family disputes and decide who's right and wrong. If there's something obvious, as police officers we'll weigh it out. Maybe there is a need to refer. Maybe the older person is living in a small part of the basement that's not finished, that looks like it's not dirty, it's not there's food, there's cleanliness, but this is their house and they've been relegated down there with a family. This would be something where we would pass information along, not necessarily a first responder police investigation.
Well, one of the biggest concerns is financial abuse. You might have seen your neighbor with his long-lost grandson, or someone who claims to be a long-lost grandson, and all of a sudden come into the picture, and you notice that they're making multiple trips to the bank and coming to the door and borrowing the debit card. That's often a big flag for people. They're being financially abused by a relative or a friend or a caregiver. There's many sources of abuse. Another one that comes to mind is a family member who's at risk because they're a caregiver 24/7, and they might be becoming a bit tense as a result of their caregiving, and sometimes that can lead to inadvertent abuse, yelling, slapping. So, look for the hallmarks of that. It's everywhere. Sometimes we see it and sometimes we don't.
Sometimes people come to the police attention first and foremost with driving. A driver's license is sometimes that last vestige of independence of an elderly person. We get a report of an impaired driver, and when the police officer stops the car and eventually tracks it down, hopefully the person is just elderly and not impaired. And then when I've done it, I've talked to the person about their driving. Did you remember to wear your glasses today? Oh, I forgot. It says on your license you're supposed to, and if you drive against the restrictions, there could be a ticket. Oh, thank you for letting me know. And then that could be simple as that. It could be a medication. Too much, forgot to take a new medication, which can result in impaired driving. And these are things, or just the health side of things. If a police officer is very concerned, a letter goes to the motor vehicle branch, which would order the person to have a doctor exam to ensure that they're still okay to drive. This isn't a bad thing because there's always the 2-year testing. Someone turns 80, then 82, 84. A lot can happen mentally and physically to a person in that age range that can be a dynamic, active person, and in 6 months that can change at that point in life. So police officers will see that, and it's our job to identify it, not to be it breaks your heart sometimes to know what you're doing, but you're doing it for public safety in general, because you don't want to let that go and then it could result in more tragedy down the road for someone else. Other things we come across is complaints about care homes, but sometimes these calls are instigated by the resident themselves who's in the care home due to dementia or advanced Alzheimer's, and there's the complaints come in and it's a person who's bringing up that they've been stolen from, they're the victims, their children have kidnapped them or placed them in there, and then we have to decipher what's real and what's imagined, or and it's very real to them, and that's sometimes the hard part. And the good thing is, in those facilities there's care workers, there's nurses, there's doctors, there's people to talk to that can give us the story. The concern sometimes I have seen is that the care aid positions may have not had, in the community, may need some better screening levels and background checks done, because from working in a community for a number of years, you see individuals that have led one lifestyle for a number of years, have done well, cleaned themselves up, gone to school, got a certificate, and are working in a facility, but how is that person able to be a guardian and have control over another person, but they have that history that I know about in my head from my dealings? This person couldn't coach hockey or volunteer in a number of places, but they're allowed to care for our elderly. So it's almost like, yeah, we put in all this effort to make sure people are okay to look after kids, but when it comes to someone who's older, we don't have that same concern. And I think we need to focus on that. Those phone calls, those reference checks need to be made, not just, and we really need bodies, we'll just take whoever we can get. That's not the way to do it. And I understand it's finances, and it's not everyone. I don't want a blanket statement, but 1 or 2% out of that big group is not. It's still not acceptable. It needs the checks and balances need to be there, and that's just personal observations.
Self-neglect is often the result of people who are living alone and are unaware of how they present. So let's say you see somebody and you've seen them in the same outfit for weeks and there's quite an odor coming from them. They don't seem to notice that. And upon investigation, we find that they are victims of self-neglect. They're not able to care for themselves properly, but they can't see it. And those are the types of things that we would investigate, or Interior Health would investigate.
I grew up in Ontario, and I went back to visit Mom Thanksgiving weekend, and she was up at our family cottage, which our grandparents had purchased back in the 30s, and she was up there for about 6 weeks. I have 3 older brothers that care for her, look out for her, but she was up there, she liked it, it's beautiful in the fall, and I just helicopter in, and I try not to say, hey, do this and do that, because, you know, they look after her. But I noticed things had gone downhill. Mom's memory, her balance, different things, and it was convenient when I took her shopping because it was getting cooler in the fall and she needed underwear, socks, personal hygiene things, different stuff she hadn't looked after. And when we got to the till at Walmart, she didn't remember the number for her bank card. And I was like, how convenient. But anyway, that was okay. So I spoke to my brothers and said, okay, this needs to be done. You guys got to get on top of this. And having 3 brothers that are all professionals and have families, that have good incomes and own properties, we have a dynamic where don't always get along like any family, but it was an opportunity where 2 of my brothers who were in different directions came together and worked very well. And Mom's will, written very clear and concise, all her instructions about power of attorney and everything else written out perfectly. Any care above and beyond, she has written exactly how she wants to be treated medically and everything else. It was done to a T. All the finances and everything else, it's there. Her house had been sold that she was in, and she bought a smaller house 2 doors down from my oldest brother. Walks over every day. All of a sudden, the diagnosis, the doctors, everything got in, and she was diagnosed with mid to advanced Alzheimer's. Not surprising to me, because coming in every 6 months or a year or so and seeing the changes, but more physical than mental side is where it's affecting her. So the walkers, the wheelchairs, the care aids coming into the house, and the day programs to keep her going. And then the discussions about finding the home, because what's the wait, 2 or 3 years? Well, one brother who, because of his actions over the previous 10 or 15 years, cutting grass, doing gardens, trimming hedges, all the work that needed to be done, keeping her home and the cabin clean, you know, he allowed her to live a lifestyle that we weren't able to contribute, so he's not as involved now, but I'm the messenger, I'm the mediator between all of them. I say, hey, you know what you did then allowed her to be where she's at now, so it's okay that you're stepping back, and it's a little tough. But I said to him, because my other brother said, he's not accepting that she could go to a home. As soon as she goes in a home, that's signing her death. My mom can't go into a home, right? And that's what I hear in the community as well. So we need you to help get that message to him. And, you know, we had that talk and let him know that it bothered me too. Well, he had digested, he'd read the materials, and now he was breaking it to his younger brother to say, no, she needs to. This is where she needs to be, because it's not right away, but we need to explore those opportunities now, not have her, you know, when things do happen, when physically she can't walk next door anymore, when she can't be in her own house, She has to be in a place where she can be cared for. So it's just a matter of process. And this is a story that, although, it's personal and it's got my personal side to it, it's also probably best case scenario because you have 4 siblings that get along and can communicate. 4 people that aren't looking at, okay, there's this money and that money and this is what I'm going to get. Because that's what I come across a lot is not looking at the person, but it's looking at that person's belongings and what I want. And there's emotional reasons, there's financial reasons, right? And there's all these conflicts that happen. It's not perfect, but it's the scenario that you want to have happen because we have those discussions and conversations. And I think there needs to be people in the community that help families along with that. And I know there are, but I don't think there's enough. That it's everyone, like we're saying, it's off the side of the desk, and to have those teams that can help families make those decisions and make people that are able-bodied, sound of mind at a certain age, prepare themselves for those times where it may happen.
So be aware, support the Community Response Network by volunteering, report any incidents that you suspect to either the RCMP, Interior Health, or Community Living BC, or even to the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee. Don't ignore it.
Every situation is different. We have to act always within accordance of the law, and we have those rules that we follow. Under the Mental Health Act, a person would be demonstrating harm to themselves or others, if we were to apprehend someone and bring them to a medical facility. It's important as a worker what you've witnessed to communicate that to the police, but if things are calm at that point, then it needs to go through the medical side of things. The doctor needs to know, and the doctor needs to make those evaluations, and a person has to be told to see their doctor. If they're unwilling to attend, then there are forms that can order a person to be apprehended. But unless we're witnessing that behavior at that point in time, although it can be, depending on the level of it, it can be conveyed to us, but it depends on the level of what was seen. Is it physical abuse that was observed by the person? Then yes, then that can be followed up on right there and then.
I do strongly believe in my heart that the CRN is something that our community really can benefit from having, and from increasing people's awareness and education about how we support each other.
Yes, I have a question. You mentioned earlier that you knew the past history of some of these people, and then all of a sudden you see them working with seniors. We have a criminal record check working with children. Is it the same, I assume, also for working with seniors? And how thorough is that criminal record check?
It depends on what the company is asking for. Is it a vulnerable sector check, which would be the highest level, and it should be. And then it's a matter of, but it's also those reference, there's that criminal record check, but it's still just there's not a lot of disclosure that can be given to a prospective employer because of the Privacy Act and everything else.
So I work for Interior Health, and all health authorities in BC are designated responders. They were appointed actually through Public Guardian and Trustee's Office. And as a designated agency, I am considered what is a designated responder. So any reports of abuse, neglect, or self-neglect come through the office, central intake, through Andre. She and I have worked quite a few cases together that are quite complex. So, and we are mandated by law under adult guardianship legislation to follow up with reports. So we must look into the situation. And under adult guardianship legislation, there's some guiding principles. And I think this is important to know because people think, oh, we're going to go and investigate and it's going to be, but that's not the case. So we have guiding principles, most effective, least intrusive means of support. People are presumed capable, and they have a right to live at risk. So those are the guiding principles that we first go in to look into the situation. So we get reports from anybody. Anybody can call in and say, my mom, my dad, lots of family members call in to say my sister is abusing my mom financially, lots of financial reports of abuse. We also, Interior Health has a 1-800 number that anyone can call as well. So, and for the most part, all the health centers or units within Interior Health also have a number that you can call. Like, so in the Kootenays, in Kelowna, here in Penticton, and we have a list of designated responders. Mental health clinicians are also considered designated responders, and they follow up primarily with mental health clients, so there is a bit of a distinction there. So that's part of our role, or that is our role. We're mandated to do that. So some of the common themes that we see, we've talked about that already. Scams. Noticed an increase in scams, as you were saying, phone. I'm actually surprised with the phone piece because I have seen people absolutely, I'm going to use the word seduced by men, if so far mostly men that the cases that I've been involved with, that they're able to tell these people that, yes, you're going to get this money, you're going to get a brand new car, you're going to get $3 million, and then they tell stories of another person that just won money. So, as I said earlier, people have given away thousands, up to $40,000 to $50,000. And sometimes we don't get involved until they're at the place where they can't pay their rent, they don't have money for food, and we get a family member calling us saying, my sister has given away all her money. She's been, involved in this scam. She doesn't have money for a phone. So it really impacts people's lives in that regard. So, and some of the challenges with that is when you go in and you start to look into the situation, and if this person is capable, but they're vulnerable, it's very difficult to be able to try to support them to come out of that kind of a situation, because the phone call will come again in a week or 2 or 3. So those are some of the issues we face. What I was referring to is that the perpetrator, so the person that is calling the adult, they'll continue to call them. So even though that report may have been put into place and followed up with, but they're capable, what I'm saying is that perpetrator, so the person that is doing the scamming, will continue to call them regardless. So in a week, 2, 3 weeks later, they'll continue to pursue them, especially if that person has engaged with the scammer and has already given them money. So they keep going back to the same place because they know that they've already engaged and connected with that person, and that person has already given them money. So the one thing I do want to say is that we're very much client-centered. So we begin with the client and go out from there. So if that person is capable and they understand what's happening, they can seek support and assistance. Yes, my son needs a little more money than all my other kids. He's always needed that. So if that client is capable in making those decisions, then that's where we come alongside more of an informal support. Is there something we can support you with? Do you know what some of your options are? They can make those decisions on their own. So it's very much client-centered. And just the last piece is just strategies. These meetings or these forums are reminders of how important community partnerships are, and collaboration and working together and forming them and maintaining them. It's a reminder to me because I'm part of the group, Joyce, but how long? I mean, it's been a while since I've been to a meeting, which anyway, so that's the piece that I think is really important, is having strong working relationships with community partners. So.
The Penticton CRN belongs to a British Columbia organization called the BC Community Response Network. And on their webpage, BCCRN, you will find a list of all community response networks in British Columbia and more information on how to handle and be aware of abuse, neglect, and self-neglect.
Yeah, so my involvement with the Community Response Network started way back in the late 90s when I first came on scene here, because the CRN at that time, the Community Response Network, was relatively new, and it was a very good mesh with what we at the Alzheimer's Society are doing, in that we're trying to keep people as high functioning and safe and happy in their current lifestyle. So the CRN is for all adults. It's not just for seniors. It's for anyone over 19 and anyone who might be vulnerable for whatever reason. It could be physical, it could be emotional, and in my situation, it could be something like a progressive dementia that's come into their lives. So the CRN is striving to keep within the province of British Columbia, and we do have support from our provincial office in Vancouver for the CRN provincially as well. The Alzheimer's Society tries to support as much as we can to help with programs and awareness so that people who are vulnerable will be in a more, shall we say, friendly, supportive community and safe. And that's something that all of us in the community can take on. So anyone can join the CRN. You can join as a private citizen, you can join as a representative for a company, a business, or for an agency. For me, the Alzheimer's Society of BC. For others, we've got Better at Home representation. We've also got representation from our designated agency, which is Interior Health.
The Office of the Public and Guardian and Trustee is under the Public Service. We're partly funded by the government, but we're actually technically a bit separate from it. So our services cover quite a few different areas, but in terms of abuse and neglect, that is more under where I work, which is under services to adults. So my role is as a regional consultant. So that means that I get referrals from all across the province, and they can be anything to do with neglect, self-neglect, abuse. However, my role is specifically around financial and legal concerns. If we do get a report around personal health care, those issues where there's more safety, then we do a referral to the health authority. So because sometimes people, they just get confused, they don't know how to get help, and so we're happy just to get them connected wherever they need the help, and often we're working very closely with the health authority either way, because a lot of the issues they go together. So when we get referrals, they can be for a lot of different types of issues around finances or legal. Sometimes they're a bit more simple and straightforward, where it's a case where someone is in community, they might be declining, and there's just no one available to help them manage their finances, and they might be getting to the point where they're, say, going into a residential care facility, and they need an authority for someone to manage the finances on their own for them. As well, we can get referrals for issues where there might be an abuse of authority. So, for instance, if someone has named a power of attorney, but that power of attorney is acting outside of their role. So, for instance, there's quite strict regulations on, say, gifting. So in BC, it's up to a maximum of 10% of the person's income or $5,000 unless they've made an amendment in their POA allowing greater gifts. But there can be some issues around either understanding what the POA involves, because sometimes people think that, oh, I'm getting this after, say, my parent passes away, so I can get it now, they don't need it. Well, not necessarily if they're not actually acting according to legislation. So sometimes we might be doing some education, or it might just be outright taking money, and then that needs to be addressed in a different way. However, our scope is quite strictly limited only to incapable adults. So if there is an issue around, say, financial abuse of a capable adult, we would be also referring to the health authority or other services available, because we just don't have the authority to intervene in that case. So when we do get an investigation, if we do decide that it is something that needs to be opened, where the person has met the two requirements of being incapable or reason to believe that they are incapable, and that usually involves a medical opinion of incapability, as well as their finances are at risk, because people can be incapable, but if they've figured out other types of informal arrangements and things are okay, we're not going to want to intervene. It's only when there's a problem. And so if they do meet that, then we might open an investigation, and we also follow the same guiding principles as the health authority when it comes to the adult guardianship. So we're going to try to be least intrusive, most effective, and do what we can to figure out how basically to have the PGT to not be involved. Oftentimes people get confused and they kind of jump to PGT taking over authority as kind of the first thing, and we have to follow our own processes. And so in general, that means reaching out to friends and family of the incapable adult, or anyone who has been involved in their life, seeing if they are interested in seeking authority for the adult on their behalf. And then if there is no one, either no one available or no one appropriate, then we might be going forward to seek that authority. However, one of the big challenges is that we can only take on authority for, at least in terms of a comity of estate, which is going through either a court order or healthcare through the health authority process, if the person has a certain level of income and assets. So if someone is only getting basic government pensions, $1,200 a month, because we charge fees for our service, which is 4% of their income, as well as a minimum after they pass away, a minimum of $120 a month for the management, then we are going to try to see if another option can be found to help with managing the finances. Just because we want to ensure that the adult has the best quality of life, the most access to their finances as they can. If we do seek authority and we get it on their behalf, then their file gets transferred to a case manager, and that case manager will be following them for as long as they are incapable or until they pass away, and so managing their finances on their behalf. So in terms of suggestions about what can be helped, is having legal authorities in place while you are capable. It's so important. I understand that getting things like a power of attorney, that can be a bit of expensive because you're, say, going through a lawyer, but the benefit of having those things in place can be huge. But as well, making sure that you're choosing someone that you really trust to be managing, because as soon as you name someone as, say, your enduring power of attorney, that person has full authority to your bank accounts. And so you want to make sure that they're going to be making good choices on your behalf. As well, having a representative agreement can also be helpful. There's different types of ones for people with more limited capacity, or other ones that are more for just healthcare decisions. And I think having all of that settled, having those discussions too with your friends and family around what your wishes are, your preferences about your finances and your legal decisions and your healthcare decisions, because we also get calls around healthcare consent. All of that is really important, so that you have it settled before things get more complicated.
People should educate themselves about the issues surrounding abuse, neglect, and self-neglect of vulnerable adults. And to know that they have a way to report it, and to know that they should be free to do the reporting, even if it's just a suspicion.
It's not just seniors. This is about adults, so anyone over 19. And there's all kinds of abuse. There's self-neglect. Then there's neglect that's put upon us, someone that we might be dependent upon, either financially or for our, everyday needs of life. But there can be financial abuse, there can be emotional abuse, there can be all kinds of different and very subtle ways that people can be abused. So people in financial institutions might notice something that just doesn't seem quite right. Or someone in a restaurant that sees the activities of people at a table that, somebody's not quite being treated respectfully here. That doesn't quite sit right. I'm not sure what's going on there. Or in our own neighborhood or our own building, if we're in a condominium, we might just have these red flag moments where we think, oh, that was strange. That doesn't seem very, very correct or appropriate to me. And we don't want to be busybodies. Nobody wants to get into other people's stuff. But sometimes it's very hard to know, what do I do? How do I act? How could I just have someone have a look-see that this is all right and this person is indeed safe? And that's where the access to the designated agency is really important, because designated agency, when I first heard that, I thought, what the heck, what is that? Well, it's merely an agency that's been designated legally to look into things. And so for us, the closest at hand would be our number into Interior Health. And anybody that wants to get a hold of information on that can contact the CRN. They can come down here to the little resource center for the Alzheimer's Society. I've got the cards ready. You can take it home and throw it in your phone book. So if down the road you need to make that call, you've got the number.